Hello everyone, welcome to Brice's Beach today. For this intro, I will be doing the first part outside during the snow because we've gotten a lot of snow and flurries, and a snowstorm has hit my area. So today on Brice's Beach, we'll be talking about a classic rock band that's been around for a very long time called Huey Lewis and the News. And here is the snow. So get ready for a discussion of Huey Lewis and the News. So let's talk about Huey Lewis and the News. Huey Lewis and the News was a band that was formed in the early 80s, and they had some of the greatest 80s pop rock music of the 1980s, like Power of Love, Heart of Rock and Roll, Doing It All for My Baby, I Want a New Drug, Stuck on You, and Working for a Living, Do You Believe in Love? All those great songs. That is probably some of the greatest 80s pop rock music ever. And another one that's appropriate for this winter storm is A Couple Days Off by Huey Lewis and the News. They're a great classic 80s rock band, 80s rock and roll pop band. They're great. They're phenomenal. The production and the music of their songs were great. Talented musicians, probably some of the most underrated musicians, like the drummer and just everyone that puts their effort into every Huey Lewis and the News song. And to me, Huey Lewis and the News was probably the best 80s band of all time because they had iconic lyrics, iconic 80s song lyrics, iconic 80s song intros to their songs. It's just classic. And Power of Love and Back in Time, they did that for Back to the Future, which I will discuss that story in just a minute. But I will say this, that Huey Lewis and the News was the greatest 80s pop rock ever. Huey Lewis and the News is probably one of my favorites, probably one of my top favorite 80s groups from the 1980s music era. They're really good, and they're so good, you can't beat them anyway. You can't beat them in any category, but they're just so good. And honestly, if you could pick out each Huey Lewis and the News song, they're just so good, and they're just so good. They blend rock music, pop music. They kind of blend some R&B and soul. They've done some acapella doo-wop. And they just blend all these music genres and create this big pop rock 80s sound to it, and which is really amazing. And to me, they're just top notch of the notch. They're just so good, talented, some of the best musicians ever. And Huey Lewis and the News, I'll tell you the story about Huey Lewis and the News. So they were offered to do Ghostbusters. They were offered to do Ghostbusters because Ivan Reitman approached them, but they said, no, we don't want to do soundtrack. Until later on in 85, after Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis approached them about doing the Back to the Future, which I'm glad they did. But later on, Ray Parker sued Huey Lewis and the News because I Want a New Drug sounded like Ghostbusters, was I don't really can tell the similarities to Ghostbusters, I Want a New Drug. But Ray Parker Jr. sued Huey Lewis and the News in court, so that was a big court battle, a big court lawsuit in the 80s music industry. But who won? Ray Parker Jr. didn't win. Huey Lewis and the News won because if you listen to I Want a New Drug and Ghostbusters, they may sound the same drum beat, but it does not sound exactly the same at all, in my opinion. And to me, Huey Lewis and the News was the great of the greats. And like, and another Huey Lewis and the News song that I like is Small World. That drum beat. And to me, the drummer from Huey Lewis and the News is quite underrated, in my opinion. It's quite underrated. They're so good, so talented in many ways. And Huey Lewis and the News has sold over a million world records, and their singles have top charted the 80s charts throughout. And Huey Lewis and the News kind of had some success in the 90s with Couple Days Off, and what was that other one? You Hit Me Like a Hammer, which that was a very good 90s, 80s, 90s rock song. So they kind of had some success in the 90s, but their biggest success was in the 80s. Which Huey Lewis and News started out as a bar band, just performing live locally at bars to get some attention, and the record label came and they got signed on. They became one of the biggest successors of the 80s pop rock music era ever, in my opinion, just ever. And Huey Lewis, in my opinion, is probably one of the greatest blue collar rock and roll voices ever. He just has that great. He kind of has a raspy voice, but it's a very raspy. But he has a very a phenomenal raspy harmonizing voice. That's how I describe his harmony. And when he harmonizes with the whole group, they have great melodic harmonies in some, and not all their songs, but when they do that, when they've done some of their a cappella doo-wop songs, they're really good. Just the production of them are great, the sound is great, and just the music is great in many ways. And honestly, the great rock and roll 80s pop music has got to be Huey Lewis and News. There's no other way. They're just one of my all-time favorites. And Couple Days Off they did is such a great song. And it's just one of the best. And Huey Lewis and News is just so good. How would I say? They're just so good. And Huey Lewis is a great vocalist, but he's also a really good harmonica player because he plays harmonica. The only time you see him play harmonica in his song is Working for a Living. That's the only time. And he's a great musician, singer, and he's a great songwriter. And Huey Lewis and News has been around since the 80s, so they are my all-time favorite band. And they're probably one of my favorite soundtrack bands, too, because they did Power of Love and Back in Time for Back to the Future movie, and such a great. Check out Huey Lewis and News if you've never listened to them. They're a really good 80s pop rock band, and check out their soundtrack songs, Power of Love and Back in Time. Check them out later today and tell me what you think of them. And just check out Back to the Future. If you don't know what Back to the Future is, it's a great 80s movie. That's one of my favorite 80s movies of all time. So good, so well done. Great acting, great cast, just great direction, just great of all. And honestly, Huey Lewis and News, I'm glad they kind of broke away from not just doing songs for songs, but they did soundtrack songs because they did a good job writing and doing some really good songs for Back to the Future, like, the one I just mentioned to you. But anyway, I think Huey Lewis and the News, I don't think they've gotten inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm not for sure, but one of these days they need to be because that's probably one of my all-time top favorite 80s bands of all time ever, in my opinion. Just they really pioneered the 80s pop rock movement scene really well. They really great, and their MTV music videos became really popular, especially the Back to the Future Power of Love that has a cameo by the DeLorean and Doc Brown, played by the great actor Christopher Lloyd. And all their music videos, what made them also famous was their widespread success on MTV of all their music videos they did for MTV. I think MTV was a good thing in the 80s for upcoming bands in the 80s because it made them greater success with all their MTV music videos because MTV was the pioneer of the music video format. So I think MTV really helped Huey Lewis and the News really get their start in their widespread success of just selling millions of records, top charting singles, and just all of that just because of MTV. I think that's why MTV was such a good thing back in the 80s because it just brought bands and singers out of the woodworks that people didn't know, and their videos became popular and their songs got popular, and they just became more of a widespread success. And I think that's why MTV was created, to get singers and bands to do videos so they could get more publicity and more music stance from the music critics, in my opinion, yes. And other thing about Huey Lewis and the News, the other thing about other thing about Huey Lewis and the News is that they did a song. Oh, it's one of my favorites called another Huey Lewis and the News song is "Hit to Be Square." That's another 80s song they did, which is great. You need to check out "Hit to Be Square." It's great. Another great classic Huey Lewis and the News song. It's great, and it's just I think they are just the great of the greats. That's all I gotta say. They're just the great of the greats. And really, it's just to me that they are the powerhouse. They're so good. They're so fantastic. Great music production. And just great sound and great vocals, great melodic tunes, and great harmonies. All of that to be said. Thanks for tuning in today on Brice's Beats, Who Listen to News edition. I'm glad I got on here today. And I hope you're enjoying this winter storm or winter weather. I am. I've enjoyed it. I'll see y'all next weekend. Next weekend, we're going to be talking about another classic rock band or classic rock in general, about someone or some singer or some band next weekend. So I won't tell you who it is. So I kind of surprised you this weekend's video topic, Who Losing This. But next weekend, I'll be surprising you, and you won't know until the videos. I'll surprise you next weekend like I did for this weekend's topic on Brice's Beats Music Info channel on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in, y'all, every weekend when I do these videos every Saturday. See y'all next weekend. Love y'all. I'll see y'all. Have a nice weekend. See y'all.